French troops broke up into units and continued the march through other sections of the city for the benefit of those who, for one reason or other, could not get along the line of the main march. The demonstration outdid anything that can be described. The din was terrific from the beginning to the end. The people along the line of march would break ranks and rush out and throw flowers at us, and even some of the young girls would try to break through with laurel wreaths in their hands. But the guards kept them back as well as they could. We, of course, neither looked left or right. We, as soldiers, were maintaining march discipline, and so much so that some of the people along the line would yell out at us, "Souriez, souriez!" But we kept on, as that we were told. I prayed that it gave the impression to the French, which they already had, that the Americans were cold and unemotional. Paris outdid itself as a hostess, and the boulevards that evening were impassable. Throngs with a jovial and carefree crowd whose only purpose was to have a good time. There is nothing in America to compare to it, for our natures are different, and we cannot abandon ourselves to a great joy as the French can. The Place de la Concorde was illuminated, and from there, together with my cousin Eleanor, we viewed the fireworks which rose from all parts of the city. The crowd was so dense that it flowed like a river, and one must follow the tide or become submerged. I stayed at Aunt Ella's that night, and on the next day and the next night, and on the morning of the 16th, I was awakened by an orderly at 10 in the morning who rushed in to inform me that we had been ordered to London to take part in the British victory celebration, and that the train left at noon so off I went to the Gare du Nord and found my faithful detail ready and waiting. We crossed the channel from Boulogne to Folkestone, and then by train on to London, where we were welcomed and as the guests of the British Empire, and splendid hosts they proved to be. Our unit of 16-odd officers and men had been detached from the main units, and so we were a little bit ahead of them and proceeded on to London before they did, which confused the welcoming party a little bit, because when we arrived we were mistaken for the main body and were welcomed accordingly by generals of a higher rank than would have been the case. However, it was one of those things in the liaison communications that had broken up, but as far as we were concerned, it turned out quite well. We were quartered at the Queen Mary's Club for Overseas Officers and were immediately informed of the program for our entertainment by two young British officers who were attached for that purpose to be our escorts. One of them happened to be the Earl of Leicester, as I recall it. The program included for our entertainment the two dinners at the Ritz, given by in our honor by the Ambassador White, a special night at the National Sporting Club, a visit to the Sandown races, where we were honored by the presence of their majesties, the king and queen, and were allowed in the royal enclosure. Also, free admission to any theater, a trip to Windsor Castle, and a visit to the Grand Fleet on the Thames. On the morning of the 19th of July, the parade started at 10 o'clock from Hyde Park. I did not march in this parade because I had marched in the one in Paris. I viewed the parade from a window in the Buckingham Palace Hotel. It was a duplication of the Paris parade, but the enthusiasm of the spectators was not so vociferous or emotional. And I laid this to the less emotional Anglo-Saxon temperament and to the keener realization of the significance of a victory. England was still dazed by her appalling losses in the war. That night, however, she threw off for a few hours her traditional reserve, and Piccadilly and Hyde Park were thronged with until daybreak, with the celebrants dancing down the streets in immense lines or gathering in ever-changing groups to sing some old war song. I remember being caught up by a group of Australians, and Johnny Walker was one of them. They were, of course, the colonials, and had been a little bit resentful of the fact that they had been given the frontline positions. But I think that night none instance occurred because, after all, we were all victors. Unfortunately, we were forced to leave London on the next day with an attempt to catch our regiment, which was scheduled to sail from Brest. The trip across the Channel was a exceedingly rough one, and a few escaped a genuine attack of mal de mer, not excepting the Marines, who took the joshing like good soldiers. We were held up in Paris, however, for 3 days, awaiting orders from Brussels, where another celebration was scheduled for the 25th. When it was finally decided that we would not take part, my division had sailed, and I arrived at Brest like a man without a country. I had the regimental colors, but no regiment. The return. While being held up in Paris, awaiting orders, I was the guest again of Aunt Ella and Eleanor, and was fortunate enough to see a little bit of life along the West Bank, or the so-called Latin Quarter. The trip from Paris to Brest was marked by an incident. It seemed that when we got to Le Mans, I volunteered to get off the and pick up a banana or two at the stand while the train was waiting for water. But the train left before I could complete my purchase. I had to run and catch it. Jumped on the last car, which was the car for enlisted men, the box car, and had to stand. And when the train stopped for water again, maybe an hour or two later, I rushed forward to my car in the front, where I opened the door of the compartment and found that my seat had been preempted by a young lady. Seemingly my fellow officers had thought that I had left behind, and they saw no reason why it could not be occupied the rest of the way. While at Brest, I was offered the opportunity to be assigned to the Rents, Reclamations and Claims Division at London. But I felt honor bound to personally deliver the regimental colors to my commanding officer. And furthermore, seemed to step down for a line officer to take part in settling civilian claims. We were thoroughly deloused at Brest, and in the course of which I lost that little piece of shrapnel which had hit me on the veil and which I had carried with me all during my service. There were numerous details here in connection with the leaving of the AEF, but fortunately we had our service records with us and also our sense of humor. Late in the afternoon of July 31st, we boarded the lighter and pushed out to the huge Leviathan, riding easily in the harbor. We had sneaked into France, but our departure was made amid band music and tug whistles and the cheers of goodbye committees. We had counted ideal weather on the trip home, except for the fact that a stupid billeting officer had confused my color guard for troops of color and assigned them to the stern of G-deck. There was very little to speak about. We were comfortably, although crowded, quarters. A number of French wives, nurses, and welfare workers were aboard, as well as some general officers whose rank enabled them to monopolize the attention of the more desirable of the fair sex. The Leviathan was the best troop ship in commission, and to us, who had put up with anything and everything, it was a floating palace. The time passed in reading and lounging on the deck. Although being a detached officer, I was picked up by the security guard officer and asked if I would take a watch 2 or 3 times on the trip over one of the entryways, which wasn't very arduous duty. We entered the New York Harbor at 5 a.m. on the morning of August the 6th, just 14 months and 17 days since our departure below decks. The Statue of Liberty broke through the mist of a very overcast morning and gave us a chilling welcome, although no one seemed to care very much about the weather. Debarkation by this time had developed into a real science, and by noon we were settled in our in Camp Merritt, coming in as we had gone out silently and unsung. I met the family at the Officers Club quite by surprise, as they had been looking for me at the pier and supposed that I would be detained in quarantine for 24 hours. I rejoined the regiment at Camp Dodge, Iowa on the 11th. I remained there 3 weeks debating on my future course as to whether or not I should remain in the service. But after due reflection, I decided that the Army was not for me, and I put in my resignation, which was accepted on the 27th of September, and this ended my service in the World War, a total period of 28 months, 25 of which were with a single regiment, and the other 3 comprising my training period at Plattsburgh. This account was completed and typed on November 3rd, 1920. I have now completed putting it on tape, and the calendar reads March 22nd, 1976. This tape is about to run out, and I just made it, which has happened to me so often in these intervening years.